It's Heather McIntyre from the Ouijinokiwag program. I am here with another amazing guest, Jeff Monague, and we are here today in the Voices of Change Cultivating Threads of the Future. You all know that I'm very, very passionate about these conversations because when we are talking and when we are creating the language and the dialogue that moves us forward and connects us, then that's how we make the changes that need to happen for all of us in this world. So I am blessed to have one of my knowledge keepers, my elders, my friend, and just an all-around great guy here with us today. So Jeff, I want to say welcome. And I want to start by asking you to introduce yourself. Who are you, Jeff? And I know, I like that.
Okay. Anin, Wena Bojo Kinawea, Mayingaman and Aqua, Dishnakaz, Chimnising, Shinkade, Kimnisis, Mio de Binjbayan. Gizido dem, Minoage, Jeff Monague, Gogishin Congo. Hello, everyone. My name is Mayinga Minanakwe. That's my Anishinaabe name. And I'm from the Bosley First Nation on Christian Island, which we call Kachimnising, but which has originally it was called Nememnising. Monague, which is Sturgeon Island because of the sturgeon that had spawned around that island. And it became Gachimnising when our people were forcibly removed from another place and then displaced to that area. So it was our last displacement. And as they were being, wondering where they were being moved to, they identified that island as we're going to the big island. So Gachimnising means the big island. So that's how, before that, they had known it as Memnising, but then it was because of our last move that it received the name that it has now. Interesting. But that's where I'm from, and I'm Eagle Clan. And I was also named Jeff Monague, and that's for the registrar, the Indian Act, the purpose of that name. And so that's my English name, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy. I'm kind of like a kid in a candy store right now, and I don't know exactly where to start because you have so much that I want to dig into. But I want to say to everybody that not only are you so, what is even the word I want to say? You have so much knowledge and wisdom to share. You've been on many journeys, and we're going to talk about those here today a little bit. You are a language keeper. Is that correct, Jeff? Yeah. And the language, that language piece is so important, especially for people like me who did not have any of that growing up, that want to have that connection, that knowing and that understanding. And you've done such great work. I'd really like to know, I know I asked you who is Jeff, but could you dig into it a little bit further with us and just kind of give us a snapshot of the things that you have done in your life, in your place, in your career, and in being here, because you have just this beautiful coat of experience and knowledge that I would love to be able to share.
Yeah, okay, sure. I was born in Midland, Ontario, and I grew up on Christian Island. I went to school there. I went to Indian Day School. So it was called Christian Island Indian Day School, United Church version. there were two versions. There was the Catholic and then the United Church. And at that time, the clergy kept us very separate within that community. So they had the Catholics were on the east side, and the Protestants were on the west side. And it was a dangerous place because there was a lot of conflict between those two factions, and that's the way the clergy liked to keep it. And it was, we used to dare each other to run down into the other area as a as a dare, and we would each do that to each other, not knowing that we were playing into this colonial structure that they had created for us, because that's what we were born into. My parents, my mother went to residential school, so she was a survivor of that, along with her two sisters, my aunts, and so it was. I was already packaged into that life when I was very young, and so that's the way I grew up. Even though my father didn't go to residential school, so he kept a lot of language. So we learned the language from him. We learned about our natural world and how to live and how to survive in our natural world from him. So that's where I gained that knowledge, and I didn't realize at the time that not everybody experienced that same thing. I just thought it was just a normal thing. I didn't know until later that not everybody got a lot of those their teachings, basically, that helped you to understand your place in the world and how you can survive and live on the land. So I'm very much indebted to him. And I always think of him when I'm out doing medicine walks and things like that, because he would do it as naturally as just as he's casually walking along. He's telling you what that plant is for and what that tree is for. And he would do it so often that eventually when you have that kind of repetition as a kid, you tend to go, I know, Dad. And so, but I'm glad that he did that. I'm glad that, because that's something that I do to my kids, and my youngest daughter, even Lisa does 2 weeks ago, would say, I know, Dad, I know. So I'm carrying on that tradition too. So but it is something that was missing for a lot of the kids that I came to teach. I'm jumping ahead here. But I did become a teacher eventually. When growing up on the island, after I went to school there from grade kindergarten to grade 5, and then grade 6 through to all the high school grades. I went to school on the mainland, and that everybody went through that exercise. And back then, the winters were much longer because we didn't have the temperatures that we have now. We had a steady winter, and winters much harder, so it was more difficult to get back and forth to Christian Island back then. And so we were billeted out to boarding homes for 10 months of the year. So it was sort of like a residential school. We didn't get to choose where we were in a lot of the cases. And so some of us on Christian Island ended up in some pretty bad places. And some of us were lucky enough to have good homes that we were billeted to, and the people were good to us. And that was the case with me in each of the places that I ended up in, along with my younger brothers. We ended up in some really good places. And later on, I went to school in high school in Barrie. And it was different because moving from Midland to Barrie, the shift meant that we didn't have to deal so much with the racism that we did in Midland. Midland was a fairly racist community. It may still be. It does have a different feel to it, and we weren't treated all that well as Indigenous people. And so we hung out together a lot. Like we stayed close together. We traveled in groups. So they would call us gangs. What we were doing it just for our own safety, because if we were caught out alone, a lot of times we were going to get beat up, and that was just a normal thing. We get beat up by groups of young white children, but they weren't called gangs. That was the difference. So when we did it, we were called gangs, and even in school, we went through the same thing. We're actively told not to band together, not to stay together. So there was a lot of that, and once I was finished in high school, I joined. I went to work for a while as in the community logging, fishing with my father, gill nets, and then I did some logging before I joined the military. And I joined the military, and I ended up in Gagetown, New Brunswick. Well, first I did my basic training in Cornwallis, Nova Scotia. I already knew the history of Cornwallis in the name of the Cornwallis, and Cornwallis was one of the worst people to our Indigenous people out east, and killed and murdered a lot of Mi'kmaq people. So it was very uncomfortable to be in a place that was named after this guy. But that's where I did my basic training, and then I went from there. I went to Gagetown, New Brunswick, which is beside the town of Oromocto, and I did about a year there, and I got sent off to Germany, and I was supposed to do 3 years in Germany. I ended up being there for 6 years because I liked it so much. I came to live with the German people. I came to understand them. I came to know their language. I married a German. I have 2 of my children are half German, half Ojibwe, and they live in Europe right now. And then I came home to Petawawa after Germany, and then I asked for a release from the military, and then I came home to Christian Island, and I was elected to council after that move. And I did a couple of years as the chief counselor in the community, and then after that, I was elected chief of the community, and I did 3 terms as a chief of my community through the 90s. And there's a whole lot I could talk about there, but I'm just gonna move on again. After I left that, I was for a period as the treaty research director with Nishnabek, which is the Union of Ontario Indians. And we were very successful in landing a lot of land claims and getting a lot of land claims through the system, so much so that the government canned that program. So it got changed into something else. So I was out of a job, and I was looking around for a job, and I saw this posting in Aurelia for an Ojibwe language teacher. And I thought, well, I taught recruits when I was in the Army. I was taught to teach, so I'm going to take that skill set, and I'm going to do this job for a little while until I get a real job. So I told myself. But I loved it. I really enjoyed teaching, and I taught every grade from junior kindergarten all the way up through to grade 12, and then later on I went on to teach at Georgian College, and they took me on full time there eventually. And then after that, I applied for this position, which I am in now, as the manager of Springwater Provincial Park. And so that's what I do. And I still basically do teaching, because before COVID, we had students in here every day. And I developed a program to teach about ourselves, to teach students around Simcoe County about us. So basically what my dad taught me, how to survive on the land. So I taught them how to find medicines, food at any time of the year, and also how to build shelters for survival at any time of the year, and how to build fires without any matches or flint or anything else from scratch at any time of the year. So, and regardless of whether it was raining or not, we were out there. The only time that we didn't go out is when it was thunder and lightning, or if the winds were too high. I didn't want to have kids in the bush when it was dangerous for them. So, but it was a successful program, and it was really good for the Mosley First Nation, because there was a source of revenue that wasn't there before that was helping them. But then COVID hit us, and like any other business, we've just been waiting for this all to be over. But you know, I think there's a few more surprises in the way as we're looking ahead. But that's essentially that takes me to today as I'm sitting here.
And I love the backdrop, because you really are sitting in the park. And that park has such a magical calling and energy, and you can just feel how it speaks, because it really does. When you go into that park, you can just feel everything speaking to you. So I can't imagine a better place to be working and playing and being involved in, because you're so connected to the land and to all other things that are really important. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I know that there's many things in between there, but that gives us a snapshot of who you are and where you've come from. I absolutely, yeah, go ahead. Oh, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I just also, besides all of that, I'm also, I was also a musician along the way, and I played in various folk concerts all across Ontario, Canada, and also I had my music. I had one time I had music on the radio. I do today too, but back a few years ago, I was able to drive down the road, listen to my own songs being played on the radio. So that was the coolest thing in the world. And then recently, I was asked to be a part of a production put together by Jennifer Podemski, who is a well-known. She's an actress. She's a writer. She's a producer, and she does phenomenal stuff. And she asked me to be a part of a TV program that she was putting together called Unsettled, which is now in. I think you can still see it on TVO. It was with APTN, but she'd asked me to write some songs for it. So I wrote some songs for that production, and they were used in that production, and they were entirely in Anishinaabemowin. So that was a great opportunity, and it's something that I want to keep doing. I've also acted since that time. I've acted in a couple of short movies, and also provide some music to others as well. So it's something else that has taken off. Plus, I'm also a writer in the sense that I write a column. I was asked to do a column with Aurelia Matters at the start, and they have been picked up by other publications in that syndicate. So my bi-weekly column gets to a lot of people get to see it, a lot of people get to read it, and a lot of people get to comment, and a lot of people get to say good things and bad things about it, which I find strange, because I mean, a lot of what I write about is just me. It's my dreams, And it's the same thing as when I was writing my music and people would critique it. I thought, oh, why would they be critiquing my dreams? This is me. Now, why are they saying my dreams are either good or bad? It's kind of a strange place to be in, but that's the world that's the world that they live in. And it's not something that would happen in our culture. It's not something that people would want to do to anyone. But that's what's there. And I understand that, and I take that in stride. I've learned not to read the comments. and I live better.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and see, I mean, there's this mind thing that we have, because that's exactly where I was going next, and I didn't even have to say it. You were just right there. And you know, again, the thing that really hits home for me, and even in my first meeting with you and how I found my way to you, is that you have voice, you use your voice, and you give voice. You create this safe space for that voice to happen. And you're right, you know, in this day that we're in, and your pieces, your dreams, your truths spark those comments. And it's hard when you're putting yourself out there, in such a authentic and vulnerable way, because what you're writing is so, I mean, it strikes to me too, because I do similar things, and you put that out there and it's like, well, what do you mean? And it's like a heart hurt, you know, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, that's, you know, but then again, that's that trying to justify, I think, and I've come to the point now where, like you, I don't justify anymore. I say that was me, that's where I am. This is not about you. This is about, you know, this spirit. And where did it come from? It came from my heart. It came from a place of unity, of strength, of love, of goodness. And if other people can't find that, well, then that's their journey, right? And we'll move along. Right. So and that is something, you know, a great takeaway that I have learned from really embracing my culture on my Anishinaabe side, to understand and know that, yeah, it's okay to be right here, to do this and to do these things in this way, instead of, you know, always being labeled as that vulnerable, oh, really, what are you doing? You know, you're just, you know, it wasn't, well, I did hear, you know, it's whining, or it's these kinds of things, or you just want to be heard. No, I just need to speak what's in me, because it's in me and it's here, and I see it, I hear it, I feel it, and it's going to be useful for someone. So that's so important.
Yeah.
I wanted to pull you back for a moment,
Sure.
and I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that you were fully inside of the residential school experience and the ripples of that, because of the fact that your family was involved. And we all know, we know the effects of what that trauma brings for generations upon generations upon generations. And I did not know fully some of the things that you spoke about, especially the Catholic and the United day schools that were there. And so that was very like, oh wow, it's another thing that I have in my, you know, toolbox now to really learn more about. And then also the billeting you out to different families on off of the island. I didn't realize, and I thank you for bringing this up, that that had happened so close. Like it's relatively new, like not new, but do you know where I'm going with this? Like, I would have thought that, you know, we, as we dig into, and I say we, as I collectively hold this container for Western peoples to show up and learn the truth, And I learned the truth as well too as we go through this inside of the program. But realizing that that in my mind was what we were experiencing a long, long time ago, not so much now. So to hear you say that, you know, these things were happening, even in this lifetime, is absolutely astonishing and appalling to me that, you know, that that would have to happen. And that adds to the knowledge and the understanding of how deeply that those other generations were impacted again, right? So it
Yeah.
was like you said, it was not only just one situation. Well, we knew, you know, we had day schools, we had residential schools, we had the 60s scoop, but it just like I can't help but sit here and be in this, oh my gosh, like this is another level of impact.
Yeah.
I don't think that people really understand that. So you had friends that when you had to leave the island to go to school, how was that? Was it something you just wanted to do? Like, how did the building process take place?
Oh, it was already in place for a lot of years before I went off, but we did go with our classmates. So we all went as a group. Every year there was a new group that went in, and then there were those that were ahead of you that had been there for a few years. So they were able to help you to understand what you were going to be experiencing, and to navigate your day-to-day situations. And so they were the ones that always said to us, stay together, don't be caught out alone. And it was the same thing. We would pass on that same information to the new ones coming in. So that was just a normal thing. Our parents who experienced residential school, they didn't think of it as it would, you know, as anything out of the ordinary for them, because they experienced a lot of what we did. A lot of the abuse from teachers, that, you know, I still remember telling my mother about a teacher grabbing my hair and pulling my ears and kicking me in the shins, and the only thing she could say was, well, you just have to listen then. And I was really hurt by that. I found that hard to take, and it took me years to realize she was protecting me. She was telling me, you're just going to have to take that just so you can still be around, you know, just because of what she experienced. There was a lot of that kind of thing, and so collectively the parents did that kind of thing. They would let their kids go through these experiences because they did. They thought that was sort of a rite of passage kind of thing, that you hope for the best every time, but you know, we're still doing it in some way, because in some way we don't have our kids going through the full program on Christian Island. We're still sending them out to board less, you know, about at least 3 months of the year now, but it's still a culture shock regardless, because that's what you're experiencing, and then you are far away from home. You don't have those safeguards. You can't just go to somebody and feel that you can talk about this. And the system is set up so that that you had to experience a certain way. When I got into high school, for example, back then everything was set up so that that you had a 2-year program, 3-year program, 4-year program, 5-year program. So Native kids were automatically inserted into the 2 or 3-year program, which meant they didn't want us there. So, and if we tried to get in a 4-year program, it was a bit of a fight. They would tell you, you're no, you're not really, you can't do the 4-year program. Basically, they're telling you you're stupid, plus they don't want you there too long. So that was a normal path for a lot of us kids that went there. So they wanted us just to, they didn't have a lot of expectations for us. They didn't give us goals, hires to shoot for. That's the way the system was set up. So a lot of us didn't get through the system, and a lot of us, but you know, I mean, a lot of us didn't make it through life, and a lot of us chose to leave along the way because of all of that hardship. And again, those are also ripples from what our parents had experienced in residential school, and you know, combine that with other forms of racism that we experience, environmental racism, for example, people not caring about our environment, and to the point where back when I was a kid, we would travel across the ice from Christian Island, Cedar Point, at least 8 weeks out of the year, solid ice. You could snowmobile, you could walk, you could ride a horse, you could drive a car, and it was a sense of freedom. So we didn't have to follow the boat schedule, which was set by the government. The government could find the community after 6 o'clock every day. But in the wintertime, we were free. We were free to go anytime, and that doesn't happen anymore. And it hasn't happened for about a decade. And even before that, it was sporadic. For probably the past 20, 30 years, it was sporadic. So what's happening is the waters are changing. They're more polluted. They're not, the water is changing. The climate is changing. And so it's not producing that ice anymore. And people don't really care. People don't really care about what that means for us. You know, the government doesn't provide us with any more tools to help us to get through. And so, you know, we experience that environmental racism at that point in time. So there are many other barriers that kids even today are experiencing there, and that's what we should be looking at and making sure that they're not having to experience that. It would be great if they were able to go to finish their schooling right on the island. Everything that they need is there, especially the outdoors and learning about their natural environment. That helped me a lot in life, and it's something that would serve them as well. And you could always make excursions onto the mainland if you want to create that transition, and so that's just not a culture shock when they do have to go to university or college. But home is home, and home is for me Christian Island. So even though I've lived out here for the past 20 years now, I always pine for home. My home is there, and Indigenous people understand that probably more than anybody else I know, because even I don't meet too many non-Native people who will refer to where they once lived as home, the way we do. But that was our last, you know, those little patches of land, the reserves, which we called shkunjgan in our language. Shkunjgan meaning the leftovers. So those little patches of land, those leftovers, came to mean something to us. We were isolated, but that there was some positives in that, because it helped us to preserve a language on that island. It helped us to be Indigenous in a stronger way than most other communities who were near the urban centers. So there was an erosion of their culture, and we see that too. But for us, we maintained a lot of it.
Oh, yeah. You know, I and this is the thing with my conversations with you is that there's just so many doors open, right? And we talk about these things today, and it's really good for everybody to hear this because there are so many things that are still roadblocks, that are still power over situations. And, having conversations like this creates that understanding to know why is this so important and what impact it's made on so many people's because I know that inside the Ouija program, what we do is we take the medicine wheel. And I have to say that, I will never, ever forget the moment that I sat with you at Springwater Park whenever, I came, and we were meeting weekly and we were there and you were helping me to connect to who I was and my person and my purpose and all of those things. And I'm not, there. I don't know that anybody's ever there. That's the beauty of the journey, right? But I will never forget the impact that you made with me, having both Indigenous and Western lenses, but living fully and only knowing the Western lens. And you drew out the medicine wheel and you told me the teachings of the medicine wheel and how that was important. And I could literally feel inside of myself as you were telling these teachings that the squirrel that you could, like it was like things were flying back into me that I didn't know, that I didn't understand that it was coming, right? And then it gave the understanding, oh, okay, that's the feeling I have, even though I didn't experience, somebody in my bloodline has, and that was part of it. And as I understood and put those pieces back together, I realized the importance and the connection that was inside of there. And then you ripped that wheel apart. And I'll never forget that. I came home and I called my daughter. Actually, I didn't even get out of the park gates at Springwater, and my daughter's in Halifax. And I called her and I said, Lou, oh my God, I'm probably going to cry. How did I not know? How did we not know? And she's doing really good work out there. So she had already been, we kind of are on this mutual quest, but it was that impact and that understanding, that knowing. And when I got asked to come to Monague and Bannock and work on this project to create this cultural awareness program, to empower mainstream organizations to grow Indigenous safer spaces, because I knew firsthand I did not have a safe space and I was half and half, but when I was developing the program, it was like, that's where I go, that's where I start. And we built the program around that because it was able to put people right there. And we're like 18 weeks in, and every group and cohort that we have that comes says that wheel, you teach the wheel in the morning and you show the wheel in the afternoon, and then we start to tear that wheel apart, and we literally tear it apart, and they are put in that. And I'll tell you, Jeff, the actionable steps that have come out of this experience from them are that they're proactively going back to their organizations and saying, whoa, we've got it wrong. We need to understand. We need to show up in a way to the Indigenous clients that we're supporting and guiding in a way of understanding and knowing that this has literally wiped a wheel, and there's so many ripples, and the trauma involved in there is going to take time to navigate, unpack, and there's a deeper understanding. They're also calling into action. They've created communities and committees inside of organizations to say, how do we best honor people? Is our vision statement, is our mission statement aligned with all peoples? Does it incorporate an Indigenous voice? Does it, are we acknowledging the land that we're sitting on of these people? Are we understanding the knowledge, the wisdom, and the teachings of a co-collaboration that can happen? Because you and I both know when we bring Indigenous pedagogy into these conversations, in any situation, understanding, knowing, and ways of being, it absolutely enhances the whole experience for all people. It's not just a them
Mhm.
versus an us. So I just, I'm so grateful for the knowledge and the understanding and just the truth that you're able to deliver here as a firsthand experience and say, hey, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Here we are in 2022. I had to look at my clock for a minute because I've been in a blur for 2 years. But here we are in 2022, and you do a lot of work around a lot of things, around education, around furthering. And, like I said, I could have a whole series with you on all the different things that you do. And can provide. But from this moment right here, what is important for us as a collective, as a collaborative, to begin to learn and unlearn from your viewpoint?
Well, the biggest thing is to understand that the history had talked about uh, our first contact, and in our first contact as Native and non-Native people, we were separate. We were distinct. We were sovereign, and that sovereignty has never been relinquished. The sovereignty of the indigenous people has never been relinquished, and we were dealing with and negotiating with people that were not from our lands, not from our shores. Um, and we started to do agreements with them, peace and friendship agreements. And those were all done as sovereigns, because only sovereigns could do treaties. So, for example, there can't be a treaty between Ontario, Manitoba, or Barrie and Midland. It's only between Canada and the First Nations, whether that's Ojibwe, or whether it's Haudenosaunee, whether it's um, any of the indigenous nations across the country. It was always done in the understanding that they are sovereigns and that they are nations, and we have never relinquished that. Nobody's ever said, well, no, we're not nation anymore. That's always there, and that's been written into the documents that that's who we are. And when Canada begins treating us that way again as sovereigns, then we will go back to undoing what has we've been tied into. We've basically been we've been confined. We've been put in shackles, and as a people for far too long, and to the point where when we start to talk about reclaiming our sovereignty, we don't know where to start. That's how long it's been an ingraining of the system that that was imposed upon us, the Indian Act system. That's not ours. That's theirs. They imposed it upon us, but it was all experience that they learned by using it on us. So, especially the people of Christian Island, they were the guinea pigs in Coldwater, which is where they had been, and they were put on the first reserve in Canada. And then because Canada wanted those lands, they moved us to Monague Island. And then Canada wanted those lands, so they moved us to Christian Island. If things had progressed the way they were progressing, we might have ended up in the water somewhere, because they would just come along and take it. And the Indian Act gives you that too. The Indian Act gives Canada the power to do all of those things. So the Canada is doing this to a sovereign, and Canada has to understand that when they're talking about other countries, Russia doing this to Ukraine, they're still doing it. They're still doing it right now. And when they come to acknowledge that, then we're going to start to move forward. But if they keep that past and those truths buried, we're going to continue to struggle, and we're going to continue to struggle together. And that's the biggest thing that needs to happen. It goes well beyond our work, which we will do our own work. We will go to the drum. We will sit at the drum. We will learn our dances. We'll sing our songs. We'll learn to become who we are again. But there's still more work that has to be done beyond that. And that's not just us that has to do that. Our oppressors have to take their thumb off of us. They have to get off of our foot, because that's what's happening to us right now, is we're still being kept under thumb, and that has to stop. And we have to be able to say it, stop, stop. And then we'll move forward. Let us stand up again.
Oh, thank you for that. And inside the program on day 2, we really talk about making movement, conversation, and change. And a lot of feedback comes back from our participants in that the Indian Act, how there's been several questions that have come up that it has to be totally taken away. And there's 2 sides to this. Can it be? And how? Will we move through that? Because I hear Indigenous peoples too say, okay, it's been here for so long. I mean, it also governs so many things, right? And I know you're going to speak to this, but I hear all sides, right? So I want to surrender that to you, and please speak to that.
So we have to go back and relearn our clan system, our Ododemak is what we call them, our Dodemak, which came to be understood to be clans. That's what the English saw, the resemblance between our structure of governance and the Scottish system of clanship. They saw the similarities between the two. They're not the same at all, but there's some similarities that we have family groups that govern. So they saw that, and so they called it clans. You guys are clans. So they placed their idea of who we were on top of us right off the start. But there's more to it than that. Our clans and our understanding of who we are comes from way back to the beginning, when we came from the stars. We were star people, and we were brought here from the stars, and the star systems that we came from were our own clans, and we were put on the earth. And when we leave the earth, we'll go back through that same way, back to those same clans. We'll always return to our clan. Even if we didn't know what our clan was while we were here, we're going to go back to those clans. That's how our understanding of the world is. While they're here in the physical sense, that clan structure helped to govern people. It helped people with housing. It helped people with their social services, helped people with education, health. Everything was encompassed within the structure of the clans, and they were a democracy, and they worked interchangeably, and they worked together all the time. They were constantly there. There was also a clan for that acted as a mediator for any disputes. There were the Ogamawak of each clan. Ogama is what we said. They called them chiefs. Again, they're looking at the Scottish clan systems, chieftains. So the heads of those clans. So they put all of that on top of those. And the chiefs were never like that. The chiefs were never the single sole authority ever. The Ogema was never that. The Ogema was the spokesperson for each of those groups, and each of those groups worked within themselves. So each of those clan structures, or those Dodemak, worked within themselves to help the society in any way in whatever way they needed to. So they each had a role within that society. When you come to understand all of that again, and when we come to live and breathe it, we take away the Indian Act, because that's what they're trying to do, is replace that system, that circular system, with this box. And they put everything into that box, which was it didn't work. It still doesn't work. And it's only fairly recent for us that we were put into that box. But it came to the point where it was always strife that was going to keep that alive. It was strife that brought it into place. So the British undermined our Ogemaws. They undermined our Ogamaok. So they were able to take that clan, the Dodemak, away from us by saying, "Don't listen to those guys anymore," because they would do things like they would promise us. There's well documented that they would do things like they would promise us provisions if we moved on to this reserve, and then they wouldn't deliver, and then they would undermine the leader by saying, "Don't listen to that guy. It would be better if you guys brought in this system here, because then you have somebody who would speak on your behalf and work with the government here, and things will be much better for you. But let's not do this anymore." So that's how they undermined that system and put their own into place. So we've lived under that now for a couple 100 years, and so people think that's theirs. They think they own it. It comes from the Indian Act. And that's all they know. So even when they start to talk about what replaces the Indian Act, what they end up with in their own heads is Indian Act 2 or Indian Act B, because that's all they know. If we go back, take our time and relearn how our governance system actually worked in the democracy in the truest sense, then will we be able to become self-governing. But we have to take that time to go back and learn that again, and to pick up those pieces. Well, everything that we dropped along our path, we have to go back and pick it up, and then bring it forward again. And we have to be willing to do that. We can't just look at what we have right now and say, well, we'll take bits and pieces of this and bits and pieces of that. Don't bring the Indian Act into it at all. That's not decolonization. Decolonization, it looks like something else, and it doesn't. You don't carry those things with you.
I knew
I
knew you were going to do that for me, and all of us. And thank you for that, because that just gives clarity. While you were saying, I heard, so where, because on, out in my experience, I do hear, well, we don't, where do we get that information, right? Can we still get it? Can we do it? Where would one start? Because, you hear that, a lot of things were oral. We've lost a lot of our elders. We've lost a lot of our keepers of knowledge and all of these things. But where would we find a starting point to start to dig into that?
Well, that's the thing, is finding people that will help to give you that. Now, a couple years ago here at Springwater Provincial Park, we held a gathering of the clans, or Dodemak. I'm gonna stop using clans. Okay.
Yeah.
We brought everybody back together to learn about the clan system, the Dodemak, and that was before COVID hit. We were supposed to have one every year, and so if things are cleared, I'd like to begin that process again, because I'd like to bring back all of that knowledge and bring back people who have that knowledge, because we have it in bits and pieces. And that's what's going to happen is we're going to put it all back together with all those people that have those bits and pieces of knowledge, and then start to reconstruct it again. And that's what it's going to take. It's like reassembling the medicine wheel. It's the same kind of process that's going to have to happen, and we have to start from somewhere. But we can't allow ourselves to get into a position of having the government co-opt that and say, we'll help you put we'll help you put your clans back together. We'll even put some money into it, because then once they start doing that, then they co-opt the process, and then it doesn't look like what you were planning on having it look like. And that's what's wrong with a lot of those systems that are in place right now across the country. People have done that, where they're saying, there's a restorative of our jurisdiction.
Restorative justice program.
Restoring our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
They have programs like that all across Canada, but they're funded by the government. So they end up having bits and pieces of the Indian Act in what is their traditional form of governance. So they're co-opted.
Yeah. So
you want to keep that stuff out of it, and you want to come back and relearn all of that stuff and then pass it on. I wish I had something I could show you what I mean, but you have a truer sense of governance within that system, and everybody was a part of it. Everybody from the young people all the way through to the elders. The women had a lot to do with it, and the Anishinaabe were a matriarchal society as well, and it was that all of that was involved in the decision making. No one chief, no one ogama was the deciding factor for any decisions. Everybody was consulted. Now, it wasn't a utopia. It's like anything else. You do have people who are going to be contrary to what you're saying. That was allowed. That was normal, and it should be still normal that you have those contraries. And so, it could be something like as simple as a decision to where are we going to have summer camp this year? Are we going to Wazoxing? Are we going over here to the western side around the Bruce Peninsula? And everybody be consulted, and the majority says, okay, we're going to go Wazoxing this summer. And there'll be some people going, I'm not going there. I'm going over there. Okay, go. And we'll meet up again. And that's really how. There's no judgment. That's really how we were all over the place. But that structure was still in place, even though we were all in different regions. And the knowledge of all of who we are was still maintained, even as we went from place to place. So then, you had different groups residing in different areas. And then they came to be, even though they're all Anishinaabe, they came to be known for the region they were in. So the Odawa were up here. They were the ones that were trading. Odawa. So they were the ones that were doing the trading. So they called them Odawa. They became Odawa or Dawa. Odawa because of the A used to be pronounced as Odawa, because that's what it was. But then it became anglicized as Odawa. And then down here we had the Mzizagi. Mzizagi became the Mississauga, anglicized. But they're Anishinaabe. They speak the same language. It's just geographically, we just gave each other names from who we are. Jibwe was a name that was given to us by the Cree. From the way that we made our moccasins. They made fun of it. They were making fun of us. But we took that and we called them Muskegwuk, the people of the swamps. So but we each took those names, and but we're all the same people. It's the English that messed it up because they didn't understand it. They didn't bother to get in to understand it. So then they started anglicizing them. Mississauga, Wendawa, Algonquin was just a complete structure by itself. Nobody knows where that name came from. And then Ojibwe became Chippewa, Chippewa.
Yeah. Wow.
Those aren't our names. That's not us. So that's what we need to do is to go back and undo all of that stuff. And it's going to take a long time to start to undo all of that stuff, because then you have the English who lay claim to those names. I've been through that fight already. They lay claim to those names and they say, no, we already have that on our documents. It's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to change all of that. What does it cost us?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what we have to be. We have to be stronger about that.
Yeah.
And talk about the human cost to it all, and start to undo all of that. And when we start to do that, then we become then that's where we're starting to think about who we are, and we're starting to become a sovereign again when we start to make those changes on our own. That's kind of thing that needs to happen.
Oh, this is all good stuff. And I would sit here all day with you. And I want everybody to know that we have a couple of pots in the fire that are coming. So keep watching, and we're going to learn more and start that down that path, doing this good work of standing up and having that voice and saying, no, this is what we need. So as I ask everybody, whenever we go to leave, what are two things that, 2 words that you want to give to this container of change for us, for everybody watching? Two words of advice, 2 words of whatever comes to you.
Zagudun.
Okay. Which means?
Zagudun, which means love.
Yeah.
Love yourself. Love each other. And that's what will bring us to where we need to be. And that's a big tough thing to do as people who have been trained to not to love ourselves. So when we collectively learn to love ourselves, we'll start to make those good changes for us. And then to think about going forward, we have to go back to the past and then pick up those things that we need to help us to move forward with that love.
Miigwech, Jeff. Virtual hug. And I will see you in the park very soon. Thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your wisdom. And until next time, Bama P.
Bama P.